Record. All right, yeah. So talk to me so I feel like I know you through social media, but I don't know who you are. So can you just give me a background? Like where are you from? What school what sports did you play? I think you look like you have a football background. Can you give me some insight on that?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, my name's Tanner. Originally grew up in Burlington. My primary sports growing up were track and field, hockey, baseball, football. Um, Probably a couple other ones that I can't name off the top of my head. And then after high school, committed to play football at Bishop's University. So I believe we actually played against each other.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
What year were you there?
2011.
Till you only were there 1 year?
I played 2 seasons.
Oh yeah, so 2011. Yeah, I would have been there.
Yeah, so
That would have been my third year.
yeah, so like I mean, you played with Andrew Barlett, so we were actually teammates for at a certain point in time, and then he went off to Con U, and then I went to Bishop's
Oh,
afterwards. So
Mr.
I played.
Concordia, we call him, man.
That's right. That's right. Um, and then after that, I had transferred to U Ottawa. Uh, so I had to do the full sit out year, which wasn't the best experience, but it was always good getting kind of in close into a new culture and stuff like that. And then graduated, and then got the opportunity to work with Donnie Ruiz and Pat Woodcock and do my internship with them. So two local coaches out of Ottawa, and they were doing a lot of really good work with certainly like youth athletic development. But Pat at the time was working with the Red Blacks, and Donnie was working with a bunch of like high school and prep schools at the time. So I got a lot of really good experience working with them, as well as obviously like private groups and stuff like that. And then afterwards got my degree, got certified, and then worked with Football North Prep for a while. And then after Football North, got the opportunity to work at U Ottawa, and that's where I'm currently in my role with women's rugby
How long have you been there?
at U Ottawa.
Yeah.
A year now.
Yeah. Okay.
Just I got there just as the pandemic was kind of starting.
All right. So then that first meeting we had, that was like kind of you were just starting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Okay. Yeah. No, I heard good things about you, man. Honestly, from what you post, man, you do good work. Like it looks, and you get results. That's what matters. And I like how you don't just put your strength numbers, you put your speed numbers up. Like you're not, you know what I mean? Strength, as you know, is pretty easy. Speed's the hard stuff where
Yeah.
you don't get the same results. It doesn't work linearly like that, right? And as you
No.
know, so I really just kind of wanted to pick your brain again, like selfishly, just to kind of get some ideas that I can some concepts I can actually bring to my group. So,
100%.
in terms of like your periodization, it seems like a very blocked approach from what I can see.
Yeah, yeah, for the most part. It's kind of so I mix in a little bit of triphasic in there. It's block, concurrent, like working on different qualities throughout the week as well. So it's kind of like a mixed approach. There's elements of fluid periodization in there as well, because I do scale readiness very, very often. So, for example, if I have somebody coming in who is showing all the signs, subjectively and objectively, that their readiness is fairly poor, they'll kind of deviate from the main idea of the session and do more of like a recovery based or aerobic based kind of session. So there's a lot of different kind of mixed approaches with my programming.
That's really cool. So, can you explain to me? So, what does your readiness questionnaire look like? Obviously, you have you obviously talk to them, but other than that, is there like a questionnaire, like a physical questionnaire that you do?
No, so um, going back to programming, I'm implementing microdosing. So I train my team 5 times a week minimum.
Oh,
So
yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
really, yeah. So really, I train them 5 times a week, and they're maybe 30 to 40 minutes tops, like tops. So they'll come in because I see them so often. I feel like I can keep my finger on the pulse with what's going
Yeah,
on,
that
and
makes sense.
the expectation is very, very high in terms of them feeling comfortable with communicating with me, like, hey, having relationship problems, hey, got 2 hours of sleep, hey, midterm, stuff like that. So that's kind of more of like the subjective approach, but I also implement a grip diometer, so I can make it kind of objective as well in terms of like how the nervous system's doing. Maybe they need a little bit more recovery, maybe we can treat it as like a deload session. Maybe we focus on more aerobic. Maybe they do a little bit more of a lighter circuit that day, as opposed to the primary work of like a strength block, for example.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's really smart. So they come in, they do the grip test. How quickly are you able to get the results? Do you have like some kind of sheet that you use that it's, and is it like one standard deviation, or is it a percentage of their average, a rolling average?
So basically, I have several sheets printed out. I'm also fortunate enough to work with a few interns as well, so they know exactly what my methods are and where they can find the sheets. So basically, expectation is that they come in, they give me a quick update, they go about doing their grip test, and then it takes maybe 20 seconds to record that. And then in terms of somebody who's having a good day, they might be within 5 points of their kind of standard or baseline test. If someone is air quote having a bad day, or maybe is a little bit more fatigued than required, then you might see 15 to 20 points difference
So
in terms of like in terms of kg.
kg, right? So
Yeah,
like they're a whole 5 kg different, or like within the
I'm
range.
not too worried. Maybe they just need to be stimulated. So they do some like nervous system type work, and then they're fired up and ready to go, and it's usually fine. If I get like, if I see somebody's like 20 kg on average lower, then that'll usually be the line I tend to cross, being like, okay, you're going to be doing something a little bit different today, and I'll usually just modify accordingly.
That's really good. So I'm gonna try this down. And then in terms of with this data, and I understand you use Team Builder.
Yeah, that's right.
So how would that look? Do you have like all your sessions like preloaded, and then you just switch them on a calendar, or do you just paste a new workout in them? Like, how does that work? How do you do that so quickly on the fly?
So basically, Team Builder is exclusively for people who might miss a particular session, because we are training 5 times a week. So they'll have the skeleton, the percentages, everything corresponding to what we're doing in the facility that they can do on their own for the most part. So but mostly you'll see in terms of the Team Builder stuff, the main kind of stuff is going to be in facility, like the workout's going to be directly on the board versus them referring to the board, because our sport coach, obviously, who isn't a huge fan of them having access to their cell phones while they're in the facility, just for like liability reasons, stuff like that, COVID, mask on, mask off kind of thing. We just don't need the risk of people putting up pictures and stuff like that. So
So yeah, I guess it's so you got to move pretty fluid then. Just boom,
yeah,
boom, boom.
yeah, it's like clockwork. And plus, like, especially within COVID times, you have to take into account transition periods, time to sanitize transition groups and stuff like that, so you don't exceed capacity. So I think the microdosing stuff has been amazing from an organizational standpoint.
It's awesome. So let's go down that path with this microdosing now. So microdosing, or is it optimal dose, whatever, there's a lot of arguments on either side. Microdosing is the right thing to do in the sense of you're just giving them what they need, or people say microdosing it's not enough, or whatever it may be. So can you explain your thought process with regards to microdosing, and how do you determine like what is enough?
So kind of, I generally got this concept from Corey Schlesinger from the Phoenix Suns. I really, really do like his work. And I think for me, the main variable that I'm trying to control, obviously, when we're talking about load management, is load. And I think that's a lot of, or just stress in general. I think that's something that a lot of people tend to miss the boat on. They'll do a phenomenal 40-minute movement preparation. In the traditional model, they might be training 3 times a week. They'll get about 20 minutes of their meat and potatoes primary work in with the stimulus that you're trying to have with that respective athlete. And really, with microdosing, I'll do the minimum effective dose for our movement preparation. There's some elements to our pillar prep and our nervous system type work to potentiate the nervous system and get them primed and ready to go for the primary work. And basically, I was looking at the traditional model, and you might have somebody who's a 4th or 5th year with that traditional model. If they stick to 20 minutes of that primary work 3 times a week. Who knows, with exams, life stresses and stuff like that, that might even be less. You might get 2 sessions a weekend. And I basically accumulated the amount of total minutes that they're exposed to over their 4-year career. And then I took a prospective microdosing session or block of 4 or 5 times a week, 30-minute primary session, and then accumulated that over a period of time. And basically, hypothetically, obviously it's very hypothetical, life always gets in the way, but if a freshman were to come in and do the microdosing kind of style where they're doing the primary work 30 minutes per session, that particular athlete might accumulate more volume, more tonnage, more yardage by the end of their 2nd year versus a senior with the traditional model. So overall, it's my argument when it comes to microdosing is just about overall exposure.
So essentially with microdosing, because you're exposing your athletes to more, but you're getting them in fresher states to continue to do good work continually.
Yeah. And like, I think I'm going to get kind of specific here, but I think it bodes very well for rugby, especially female rugby athletes in particular, because they're so used to go all the time. Like they need to feel that like finisher at the end or feel crushed after a workout, just like they played an 80-minute game. But I found that a lot of the results that have been made in the last few months are because of this particular format, because I'll have a lot of them come up to me and be like, wanting to do extra work. And I say, absolutely not. Like, I'll see you tomorrow. Let's hit it hard tomorrow kind of thing. They're like, oh, coach, like I feel good. I'm like, good, keep feeling good. Like, I'll see you tomorrow.
So that's interesting because I definitely agree with that in the sense that, like, especially in female rugby, they want to get like, feel like their ass got kicked after every session.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things I've had to work through to kind of how do I regulate that. My question now becomes: Are you worried about girls going outside of your program and doing more? So, like, for example, I'll give you an example. I have a situation. I'll draw up a nice plan. Everything's great. And then the girl wants to go for a 5 or 10K run because it just makes her feel good. So have you had to deal with any of that? Is there things that maybe you're not aware of, or how do you feel?
So with your particular example, that's something that I had thought about for sure, because like I said, it's like we have a bunch of Energizer Bunny, like they want to go constantly, right? And obviously they do play such an aerobic dominant sport where they might be used to running 3, 4, 5 times a week, right? So I basically set up parameters being like, you're going to do the primary set of work, whether it's morning or afternoon or whatever our availability is. You're going to recover, fuel up, take a little bit of time. And then if you choose to do almost a little bit of like an aerobic type session, then feel free to. So hypothetically, if they were to train at 7 a.m., they go home, rest up, fuel up, go about their classes, they're freed up again or at like 2 or 3 o'clock. At that point in time, if they felt like they wanted to go for a little bit of a run or hit the bike, then I said by all means, but just within these particular parameters. I get fairly specific because obviously I want to be mindful of, if they are running, how much kind of stress they're imposing on their joints, right?
That makes
Like I wouldn't expect them to go for like a 15K. I'm like, no, like cap it at this, like hit X amount of kilometers per week.
Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. So in saying that, let's talk my favorite stuff. Let's talk some speed, man. I see from what you post, again, it's crazy this world we live in. Like, you feel like you know someone, but you don't really know. This is the first time. This is the longest I've ever spoken to you, like in person or in virtual, I should say. So talk to me through with your speed. Is this something that with the microdosing, are you able to hit every day?
Yeah. So basically, this is where the concurrent kind of trend with my periodization kind of fits. So basically, there's a different theme on different days with the overarching concept of what it is we're trying to accomplish for a macro cycle in mind. So we might have a we have 2 predominant strength days that are going to stick to our corresponding blocks. The other days are going to be more themed based on particular qualities. So one day might be our A cell dominant type day. So we're fortunate enough to have our kind of hybrid structure where we can have our weights and the field in one kind of similar space. That's something that U Ottawa has done a really good job with in terms of making adjustments. So we'll have like an A cell dominant day, speed then strength, our max velocity day, speed then strength, and then multi-directional speed. Obviously, when it comes to change of direction and managing rapid eccentric loads, a strength session in particular with that particular session might be more eccentric and isometric dominant. So that's more or less how I break it off. It's more or less a hybrid model.
So let me guess. So what do your weights look like on an Excel day?
So on an ACL day, so more moderate weight. So you might, if you're looking at our ACL day, we might do obviously our main kind of primers, our meat and potatoes when it comes to the speed, give them a nice long break to feel a little bit more fresh. Then you might get something more along the lines of like a non-counter movement jump, like a loaded non-counter movement jump, a box squat. So basically going from zero momentum to trying to drive a particular load up with a lot of intent.
Okay, and then on your max velocity day?
Max velocity day, I'll change the angles up a little bit more. So you'll be looking more to like a half or ideally more of a quarter squat, substantially lighter loads. Usually we'll implement some accommodated resistance, so bands or chains, and then really just focusing on the speed in which they're moving that weight at.
Nice. And then on your multi-directional day?
So multi-directional day, like I mentioned before, that's going to be mostly a circuit that is going to be very dominant in terms of the tempo, definitely focusing on the eccentric and isometric loads. Like you'll see a freshman come in, and usually obviously from like a motor learning standpoint, they're not exposed to a lot of the patterns that we're doing, A, but B, they're just not strong enough to handle those eccentric forces. Like if you have a 160-pound female athlete and you see them being able to stop and cut and resell on a dime, basically at any given point, they're putting upwards of 300, 400 pounds into the floor, right? So that takes a substantial amount of strength in terms of handling those eccentric and isometric forces. So based on that theme alone, that's what we tailor a lot of our strength circuits towards.
This is good, man. This is really good. So in saying that, so let me guess. I guess those high days would be like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. In terms of like you have your A cell day on a Monday, for example, max velocity on the Wednesday, multi-directional on the Friday, and then Tuesday, Thursday would be.
Yeah. So basically Monday off.
Okay, Monday.
We'll go Tuesday, like HPC specific. So that's where we're mostly going to be in facility, not accessible to the turf. So that'll be more strength predicated. Wednesday will be A cell dominant. Thursday back in more of a strength setting. Not to say that we're not addressing particular qualities. Friday we'll do a multi-directional speed and some aerobic work, and then Saturday's our max V. Sunday off.
Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, your weekends are Sunday, Monday.
Pretty much, yeah.
You just shift everything. That's really cool. No, that's really good. In saying that, with max strength work, do you do when you say your strength work, what does the strength day look like? So in terms of strength day would be on your A cell day, correct?
Sorry, say again.
Your strength day would be on your acceleration day.
Yeah.
And then what does the strength session look like?
So strength session, basically they're broken up into 2 different formats. So I'll have a vertical linear day on like a Tuesday, for example. Thursday might be more horizontal lateral / rotary. So that's how we generally address certain planes. So for example, if you're looking at a vertical linear day, that's when we might be getting into more of our barbell floating heel split squat, or our kind of eccentric or tempo, our weighted chin-ups, push press, things like that. Our Thursday horizontal lateral rotary, obviously a lot more bench, a lot of hinging dominant movements, and a lot of pulling.
Yeah, no, this is like it's unique. Like to me, like I don't know, I'm very boring and vanilla, but I like you spice things up. It's really good. I'm definitely gonna
No,
I have a lot
vanilla's
of
good.
pardon?
Vanilla's good.
Yeah, no, but I'm getting some good ideas. And it's how you put your days together. Because one thing I've realized, man, is like everything works.
Yeah,
Like everything works. Everyone, you know what I mean? Everyone's getting results. You know, some ways are faster than others, but again, it's all in moderation depending on who the person is, right?
yeah, absolutely.
In saying that, yeah, I'm always looking for new ideas to kind of spice things up for my group. So it's so how it seems like how do you do a lot of specific work like all year around?
Yeah, well, I mean, unless we're talking kind of transitioning from season or entering kind of like a general preparatory phase,
Yeah.
then obviously that's going to be a little bit more generalized, like just building capacity, working on their aerobic base and things like that. But pretty much as we get closer to training camp and stuff like that, things are going to get a lot more specific. So basically, my objective goals or my KPIs is to get them as strong as needed, as fast as possible. As soon as that happens, we get into a lot more specific metrics in terms of like individual peaking protocols. So those Tuesday, Thursdays, although they might be similar themes, are going to be a lot more individual in nature. So basically, I'm looking at establishing where certain athletes stand in particular zones. So there's 14 training zones generally, ranging from speed, power, and strength. And basically, as soon as they get to their necessary relative strength, they're moving on, and then things get a lot more individualized, a lot more specific. So basically, based on the timeline that we're at right now, I'm anticipating May, June, July, preferably everybody by July is doing some kind of individual type work.
Man, good for you, man. I really, I really enjoy watching the stuff that you do, man. You do
I
awesome.
appreciate that.
Um, last thing I want to talk to you is your use of Supra Maximal eccentrics. So I kind of asked you on your Q&A Sundays, I asked you, so can you kind of just explain when and how you use Supra Maximal eccentrics and what benefits you have seen by using it?
So for me, like I mentioned before, I had worked with Football North Prep beforehand. So we're talking 16 to maybe 19, but 16 to 18-year-old range in general. Donnie, the coach that I had been working with that respective group, almost like a very Poliquin style, a lot of particular tempo. And as soon as a particular loading parameter would be incorporated, the first thing you see is tempo go out the window. And especially with that particular group, it would happen time and time and time again. So really, one of the main reasons why, aside from the benefits from a physiological standpoint, one of the main reasons why I incorporate kind of like a triphasic block system when it comes to like concentric, eccentric, isometric type stuff is that it obviously drives a lot of intent. They're very specific stressors, but when it comes to the more concentric work, you don't have to worry about over coaching and over cueing and constantly correcting particular tempo, because my 3 second eccentric is very, very different from an athlete's 3 second eccentric. And that's fairly normal. So in terms of timing, so for example, right now we're doing our alactic block. So everything is 85, 90% or greater, under certain amount of seconds for primary work. After that, a little bit of a deload, focusing more on aerobic stuff. And then afterwards, we're going to be getting into more of our super maximal eccentric and then super maximal isometric particular blocks. Now they are really, really stressful because they are super maximal. So that's where something like the grip diameter test and the readiness scale is going to be really, really important, because I might have a third or a fourth year be completely fine after 2 sessions, and I might have a first year be completely crushed after 1. So I think that's where that flexibility is really, really important. But in terms of the benefits that I'm looking to kind of scale with the eccentric work in particular is more or less just is tissue resiliency. That's the main thing. So obviously when you are under load, you have a contraction, and then when you're focusing solely on very, very heavy eccentrics, you're ripping those actin and myosin heads apart, which obviously when you have an environment that fosters recovery is generally going to aid in a lot of growth in terms of muscle, but as well as resiliency, right? So that muscle tendon relationship is going to be a lot stronger, and there's generally going to be an immune system benefit to that as well, because you're going to get a surge of white blood cells after that. Those little micro tears are accumulated as well. So generally, in terms of timing, I like to do a 2-week block of the Supermax eccentric with that flexible model, then a little bit of a deload, then isometrics. And then afterwards, you'll see more of concentric dominant movements. So something along the lines of like French contrast training and stuff like that.
How with regards to that deload now after the super maximal, so you do two weeks of it. How many times in a week would you do it based off of your just twice?
Just twice.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So they get 4 workouts in. How long's that deload now?
A week.
A week, and then during that deload, what does that look like for you?
So really, when it comes to my deloads, obviously you want to be conscious from the strength standpoint of how much volume you're accruing. I don't like to deviate the intensity too much. So I'm certainly not going to be doing super maximal during a deload, but the intensity is still going to be fairly high, but I'm generally trying to control the amount of volume that's accrued throughout the week. But I really do like to use that time of a deload period for a week to focus back on the aerobic system. So obviously just getting the blood moving, promoting recovery, addressing the aerobic system, because obviously we are in a very aerobic dominant sport. So that might be things like circuits, obviously very running dominant. I like to incorporate EDTs quite a lot. I think they're very, very useful in terms of quality assurance, and obviously incorporating the aerobic system without necessarily the wear and tear of constantly running.
I'm gonna pause you there quickly. Can you just explain EDTs?
So yeah, EDTs, they were founded by Charles Staley. So basically, a lot of it pertained to offensive linemen in the NFL. So they tried to find a creative way to address the aerobic system of these 300+ pound guys without running. So what his protocol would basically 2 to 5 movements, give or take. A lineman would go over, do 2 power cleans, take a under 20-second rest, go about doing a triple on the bench press, a triple on the back squat, and then back to the clean. So basically you're keeping that heart rate between 120 and 155 for a prolonged period of time. So you can do a slight modified version of that, but generally they'll last anywhere between 8 and 12 minutes while you're accruing really, really quality work between those main primary movers.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I do stuff like that through clusters. So
yeah.
So you said Charles Staley?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna check him out. Thank you. All right. Now we've talked about that deload week. Now let's move over to the super maximal eccentrics. Sorry, super maximal isometrics. I apologize. I guess the format looks the same in that.
Yes. So when it comes to like the Supermax eccentric and the Supermax isometric, I like to do kind of like an undulating style. So you might have, so if I'm going to use isometrics, for example, you might do 105% of your, I like to go unilateral. I really do. I don't, just in terms of risk versus reward, I'm not particularly huge on Supermax back squatting, especially with athletes, because obviously availability is a very important role. So hypothetically, let's say we're going to go isometric focus, super max. 1 week or 1 session, I might have them do 105% for a 10-second isometric. The next session, I might have them do 120% for a 6-second isometric. So that's generally how I like to handle that. So they're different ranges of stressor based on the total volume.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense there. And then after your isometric, super maximal isometric block, you go back into a deload.
Yep, back into a deload.
All right, so you do some EDTs, aerobic work during that time. And then from there, do you move over to just regular training, a concentric block? How does that look?
I like to go into a concentric block. And then after that, you're going to be more into towards like power development, a lot of French contrast work, potentiation clusters. And then, like I mentioned, going more into kind of like the individual realm of things, individual programming based on what their greatest need are.
That's awesome. So let me just rewind this back now a little bit. All right.
Yep.
So going back to when you go through your eccentric and isometric super maximal work, what does your running look like during this time now?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. So generally, I don't generally test around that period of the super max work. As you know, fatigue is going to mask results. So I like to try to keep those particular stressors at a minimum, and then I will revisit testing after they've completely recovered from that super max work. Now, in terms of what the running is going to look like, it's going to be the same. So you're not going to expect a ton of volume, but I might say you might have 3 good reps today. If it's a max V day, you have 3 shots. That's it, and then we're moving on.
And then with the max V work, for example, are you telling them to do a full out 40? Or are you telling them to do a flying sprint?
We don't do much 40s. We really don't. So basically, I like to attack 2 different kind of qualities when it comes to our max V days. So it'll be the achievement of max velocity on one day, and then the other day it might be the ability to maintain max velocity. So I like to incorporate a lot of flying, a lot of flying 50s, a lot of flying 60s, depending on the week.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So with your flying, was it a 10-meter run in, 5-meter run in, or 20?
I like about 15.
So 15, and then so on the holding days, they fly in and then they're holding it for 50.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, so you have the space to do that, right? Like, because you guys have the football fields. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's the benefit of COVID too, I guess. And not to say benefit of COVID, but the benefit of COVID is there's not a lot of competition for space, because obviously you have to be very mindful of the amount of people that you have in a particular space. So really the last few weeks has been smaller groups. Like I'm managing like 16 at a time at a given session, and there's really no other competition for that particular space in the dome, which has been really, really great, especially for max V days.
Yeah, that's really cool. It's really good. I guess you're finding it's nice to have these smaller groups, isn't it?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Plus, it
Yeah.
obviously, like from an athlete standpoint, you feel like you're giving them a lot more individual attention, or if you feel the need to coach them up a little bit more, I tend to not try to overcoach. I do my fair share of explanation, but I definitely don't want to find myself correcting a ton of people when it comes to like running mechanics, or like focus on your arm doing this and stuff like that. I really try not to overcoach, but the small groups are definitely a good thing.
Yeah, it's interesting with the overcoaching thing. I had a conversation with a coach, and I told him, I'm like, yeah, I don't coach. He's like, what? I'm like, I just let them try and self-organize, right? Right. I'll try and
Yeah.
I'm a constraints-based guy, so I'll put them in certain constraints. We'll do certain wall drills. I'll do some sleds,
Yeah.
and like it'll get them into positions, and then I just kind of leave it at that. But yeah, I agree, man. A lot of people, they overcoach, and you have athletes that are just like thinking about too much as they're going down the field or the court or whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I've told several coaches this before, like if you want to see the role that your coaching plays, like take some time and gates out, let them run, and then give them 5 cues about an internal focus of their body, and have them run again. Watch what happens. Seriously.
Yeah,
But if
no,
you
that's
think
really
about it, like like sprinting is a neurological phenomenon. Like if you're attenuating enough load, or sorry, accumulating enough load, and you are driving a lot of intent with those high speed movements, really you should see a substantial difference in 6 weeks, 8 weeks for the thing that might, from a coaching standpoint, might really bother you. Oh, his arms out, or he's undulating his hips too much, or he's a squatty runner. Like all those little things that might bother you as a coach, but if you're driving intent and you're just letting them go, like you might see a substantial difference in 6 to 8 weeks, and you might or may not have coached them whatsoever.
It's funny. So I saw a article today that got posted, and they found that athletes will have a better 1RM when their spine is flexed, right? But it's like from a coaching standpoint, you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I don't want to see like a bent back when we're lifting, right? But again, it just goes to show like sometimes max effort's pretty ugly. Like, you know what I mean? It's not perfect. And there's obviously the skill of running, there's a range, a bandwidth that you need to be within, right? Because you got tall athletes, long femur, short femur, all these things change, right? The ground contact times and things like that. So that's a lot of coaches, I think early in your career, you get caught up in like overcoaching because you want to, show your worth, but
right.
It's really good to kind of just sit back and relax.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's hard to generalize too, right? Because like it could vary by position. Obviously, if you're trying to address just like developing speed, that's one thing. But like if you look at something like a linebacker versus a defensive back, or really that's probably a bad example. Maybe like a receiver versus a defensive back. Like that defensive back might have like a squatty max V run, and you can spend 3 months trying to correct that per se. But like if you look at what is entailed with the respective sport, like he needs to backpedal 7 yards, flash his hips, cut on and out. Like he's going to ultimately benefit from that squatty run in respect to his sport, right? So you got to kind of pick your battles.
It's interesting. When I was working with the Argos, we had GPSs, and basically we figured out, when athletes were hitting a certain amount of max velocity running in a practice, they would end up sore. And what we did find was that the max velocity running that the defensive backs did was significantly lower than the receivers, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So it's going back to what you said, how much time you really need to spend doing. You need to do your max V work, but don't overcoach it. Don't lose your mind, right?
Yeah.
That's really smart on your end. Going all over the place. Going back to Supra Maximal work. How long do you find it takes for athletes to rebound from this now? So they've done their work. I don't want to say what quantifies it, because not everyone has force plates to be able to quantify it, but like from a qualitative standpoint, what do you see is a difference after you've gone through a block of the Supra Maximal work?
Generally, like in terms of like quantifying things, I just like to see the gap close between their more or less like ceiling of relative strength from where they were before. So like, for example, from like a testing standpoint, I don't necessarily do like a gauntlet. Like it's not one day we're going to hit everything. I like to do different testing protocols on different times of the year. So if we're looking to the spring, summer, fall type months, that's going to be very field dominant testing. If we're looking at fall, winter, early spring, that's where we're going to be predominantly focusing on strength stuff, because I'm expecting them to be as strong as needed by that time. So for example, on my end, I'm going to have them go through these particular blocks, and I'm keeping in mind their ceiling of relative strength the entire time. If they hit it, they're moving on. So I might have 3 of them advancing, a bunch of them not. But really, after these blocks, we're going to be revisiting our strength testing for the last time, and we're leaving it alone, and then we're moving on to more individual and field specific work.
So smart. I'm glad, and I guess like you have a good rapport. Like Jen speaks very highly of you, but you guys have a good rapport to be able to tell a coach we're not doing any kind of strength testing for this prolonged period of time, which is, I think, is amazing, because then it gets athletes focusing on the things that matter versus the stuff that, okay, we don't really care about this right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
exactly. Like we just capped off our third strength testing last week, and the results are actually really good considering the lockdown. But I said, like, if you feel some type of way, like, cool, like, I'm not particularly like gonna get too jazzed up about it because we're doing this again in 8 weeks from now. I told them all the blocks, I told them all the benefits, so I can try to get as much buy-in as possible. I'm like, that's it. Like that, like 8 weeks from now, this is your last chance. Like, if you wanted to get a particular number, if you were aspiring for a certain lift, like, you have one more shot. Let's take these next 8 weeks very seriously, and then we're forgetting about it. We're not going to address that again.
a lot of sense. I think that's the kind of the approach I've taken with our 15s women, our women's 15s. Like, as we're getting ready for the World Cup, it's going to be like, oh, listen, all I'm going to care about is your field stuff right after we've done our strength work, right? So we're in the winter, we're in lockdown. Obviously, things are wonky because of where we are, but we're going to test. I'm going to test in May and then say, see you later. And that's just train to train, focus on our power, right?
Yeah.
So are you a clean guy? Or I shouldn't say that. Do you utilize cleans? There's a war on, are you a clean person? Are you not a clean person on Twitter? I'm like, who really cares? Right? Again, all things work. It's just a matter of what can you do in your situation. So what do you do in your situation with regards to cleans?
So, I mean, coming from my athletic background, like, I was fortunate enough to have my high school coach also be a strength coach. He worked at McMaster, and I've had a lot of really good mentors. And he was a clean guy. He was an Olympic lifting guy, and so I very much grew up with that. And me myself, I enjoy Olympic lifting, but from a coaching standpoint, in terms of what I am or am not going to be incorporating into my program, it's ultimately going to come down to efficiency. And honestly, I'm comfortable with leaving my ego at the door and being like, no, I'm not going to spend X amount of weeks or X amount of months perfecting your hang clean because I'm trying to win games. Like, I'm trying to get results quicker. Like, I'm way better with doing all the clean variations with a trap bar. Like, for now, like, honestly, I'm good with that. I don't need to stroke my ego. Like, that's just how I see it. But it ultimately does come down to the time and efficiency for me.
That makes sense. Now, with regards to, let's move over to the trap bar. What are these trap bar variations? How do you load it? That's always one question I've always had. Is like, do you have VBT or anything like that? Do you guys?
No.
Okay,
No.
so then now my question.
It's in the works.
That's cool. Get a VMAX Pro? It's really like it's cheap, and like all the metrics that you get are really good. Like you can get eccentric rate of force development, you can get eccentric speed, as well as a concentric power. Like I'll show you one time. It's the metrics I get top notch, and for $300, it's equivalent to a push band, and you get but you get it's more reliable and you get better data.
Okay, I definitely have to look into that. You definitely got to show me that then.
Again, I always recommend it, bar none, get a VMAX Pro. Sorry, little rant. Go moving on. How do you load your trap bars? How do you determine what is good and what's not?
So I basically go off qualities again. So early in an off season, one of my biggest priorities or my biggest question that I ask myself is, can this athlete handle eccentric loads? Can they handle rapid eccentric loads? So if you're looking at a particular trap bar variation, you might take more of like a linear model with how you progress said load, but that might be looking from an exercise selection standpoint, like a trap bar snap down kind of thing. So starting a triple extension, heels off the ground, snapping down and not letting that load move whatsoever. So,
and are they going to, what are they going to, just above parallel, below parallel?
Above parallel.
Above parallel. So it's like almost catching it in like a quarter squat-ish?
No, I'd say half.
Okay. So
So like
they're on their heels,
violent,
boom, they drop down.
yeah, they're off their heels, they snap down. How fast and how violent can you pull yourself down? And I'm expecting that bar to not move whatsoever. I don't want any kind of deviation, no swaying, anything along those lines. So just snapping down, that's kind of like the initial phases that I like to focus on is that, again, going back to that question, can they handle eccentric loads? Because generally, if you look at like those force plates, right, like generally the more concentric based athlete, they're going to be that line is sharper between eccentric load to concentric load. They're going to be able to handle greater eccentric load faster, right? So that's kind of my first question. And then after that, I go to more kind of like starting strength almost, or you might see kind of a non-counter movement jump. So going from a dead stop to a loaded jump. And then after that, you look into more things like rate of force development. You're increasing the amplitude, you're increasing the frequency. So that might be something along the lines of something that I can probably send you one of the posts that I have on my account, but a lot of bands, a lot of chains, a lot of accommodated resistance, where something is actively pulling yourself down, but you're trying to keep the amplitude and the frequency high with that particular load.
So
I like to go heavier load to lighter load, is to answer your question.
okay, so basically you go through a triphasic action with your trap bar movements from a snap down to a concentric movement. So it's like you're stopping, you're in a static position and then you're exploding. Then you go through a dynamic action.
Yeah, exactly.
So with the trap bar now, you're going, so how heavy, like how heavy are you going on these trap bar snap downs?
I will usually start them off at maybe 85 pounds and go to about, and I'll set the ceiling for about 155.
And then so are you're the athletes that can handle the most load, obviously the ones that can handle greater eccentric loads. Now, from a performance standpoint, are these your best athletes who can change direction, things like that?
Usually, there's usually a very high, like a strong relationship with that. Because like you might have two athletes handle those eccentric loads, but like even from like a coach's eye standpoint, like you can see which one is violent with it and which one is not, who can pull themselves down and snap down violently, and which one is just getting into the position, right?
Oh man. And then you're quantifying this by you looking at, you're like, all right, this is good, this is bad. We need to do more. We need to.
Yeah, until I have something that can give me those metrics from a quantifiable standpoint, that's what I'm basing it off of.
You don't have to sell me on anything, brother. That's honestly, I think that's amazing. That's really good. Like I think again, we get into a world of like how do you prove it, things like that. But like in your situation, man, you have a good eye. Obviously, you know it works for you. So we've gone down to the snap trap down. Oh, sorry, trap bar snap down. So now we're gonna move on to a concentric action. So are they gonna snap down first and then contract, or sorry, then go concentric, or are they gonna just start from a concentric? Like gonna lift the bar
For,
up a little bit and then go?
for like a phase two progression.
Yeah.
So that you might look at like a non-counter movement jump, for example. So starting from a standing position, slowly lowering yourself to the point of flexion that I'm looking for them to accomplish. I want a 2-second hold or a 3-second hold, depending on the person, and then up as high as possible. And usually like I like to go with like that 10 to 30%. So early on that scale, it'll be higher up on the loading. And then as the rate or the frequency or the amplitude increases, the load reduces.
So you go from heavier to light, and then
Yeah.
with the non-counter, that's really so. Oh man, that's good. And again, so now let's talk third phase of this now.
So this is something where I'll incorporate a lot more accommodated resistance, more specifically bands. So I want something to actively pull them down.
You're doing
That
the
they
bands
have.
with the trap bar,
Correct.
and are they? How do you have like an apparatus where it's set up, or do they stand on it?
They're going to be starting from a standing position
No, no,
with
no. Are they
max
standing on
tension.
the
No.
bands?
Oh no, we'll be using the pins.
Okay, okay. Oh, so you can do it in the. That's okay. You have a nice cage, or you can handle it. Okay.
Yeah.
Set up that way. Okay, that changes. Yeah. So continue.
So with that, so obviously their starting position is going to be the point of max tension. So they're going to be at their highest, standing up with the trap bar, lighter load, like I had mentioned, because of the accommodated resistance and the rate in which they're going to be doing the repetitions. And they're going to be actively pulling themselves down and then back up to the standing. And usually with that, because of the amplitude is so high, I'll do more of a time set versus like a repetition based one. Because obviously that's a lot more specific. You're looking at obviously rate of force development and how fast they can handle those loads and repeat it, right?
So it's almost like an oscillatory.
Almost. Yeah, almost.
And again, the positions you're looking at again are about half.
Yep.
Quarter, half to quarter. There's pop, 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 pop.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So now how long would you stay in these phases? Would you stay until it looks good? Would you stay until, or is there like, 4 weeks we're done?
I'll do the traditional 3-week deload. So 4-week total.
For each one. And then do you go back to any of these qualities? Do you keep cycling it? Or do you just say, oh, snap down, non-counter move, jump, back and forth, get closer to season, bands?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the duration, I tend to just cycle through it once, but if I have ample time, then I can either extend a block or cycle back to it. I think there's something of value to revisiting them personally. Like I think you could argue even in season, just from like a nervous system standpoint, like doing like a high RFD kind of focused exercise or high amplitude focused exercise pre-competition, I think would be super valuable. But so generally I do tend to circle back to it.
Is you just rotate these, and these are your, again, Olympic lifts variation for you.
Yeah.
Very simple.
Very simple. It takes me all of maybe 10 minutes to explain. I have to be very, very clear cut with what the expectations are and what I'm looking for in particular. I'll communicate that maybe once or twice, and then I'll mostly facilitate the timing of those workouts. But aside from that, very, very simple.
Man, this is awesome. This is awesome.
Thanks.
You give me so many ideas. I think that's all I have for today, man. I'm definitely gonna take some of these things, implement into my practice.
No worries. We gotta do a part 2 sometime.
Yeah, for sure, man. Like this is, again, very, very simple. It's well thought out, well organized. Like, you're good, man. You're good, man. You're good at what you do, man. Good job.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
Good.
Happy to shed some light on these things.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I'm gonna stop recording.